Where's Fielder?
He's gone to the dogs.
Hey, folks, welcome once again to the Gone to the Dogs podcast. Steve Fielder here with you. Another week is come and gone. It's a Monday for you there in listening land. We had a guy back in West Virginia. He would key up the mic on his 500-watt radio station every morning, and he'd say, "Hello, world." I imagine that 500 watts was probably reaching out of the holler he was living in, maybe a little more than that. Hey, got a good podcast for you today. Got a friend that I met for the first time 2 or 3 years ago at Autumn Oaks, and always enjoy seeing him and talking to him. And we've got a really good podcast for you if you are a coon hunter, a dog man of any persuasion that's always wanted to go bear hunting with hounds but never did go, or perhaps you have gone and would like to relive those experiences or so forth. So that's going to be the crux of what we're going to talk about today. My guest is Jerry Barker from Nancy, Kentucky. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. Doing really good. Just glad to be able to jump on here with you and hear about your trip out to Virginia. I'll just reminisce a little bit. I believe you and I first met at Autumn Oaks, didn't we?
That's right, yeah. Probably 3 years ago, before COVID it hit anyway.
Yeah. I think it was before the COVID year, maybe.
Yeah.
And which I didn't go to to Autumn Oaks during that year. I'd heard that it was going to be restricted in the number of vendors and a lot of things like that.
I didn't go there.
Yeah. But anyway, what do you remember about that experience?
You mean meeting you?
Yeah. How did we get together?
I've read the magazines, the coon hunting magazines for, a long time. So, I knew of you. I'd read a lot of your, reading or your writings, and, I've been listening to your podcast. That's after you and Chris Powell started the Houndsman XP podcast. And I don't know how many podcasts you've done, but I've probably listened to all of them. So,
well, it's Buddy Woodbury with W Hunting Supply, who, by the way, I'll mention as being the guy that's responsible for this podcast to be airing today. W Hunting Supply out there in the state of Washington has virtually anything a hound person would want in the way of equipment and apparel, and does a great job of working with all the different dog associations around the country and contributing to their efforts and all. Just can't say enough good about Buddy and my friend Jason Doobie. They do a super job out there, especially with their customer service. So if you guys are listening and need anything in the way of hound support for yourself or your dogs, W Hunting Supply, dusupply.com. But anyway, when Buddy approached me about doing a podcast on their network, which is called Houndcast, W Hunting Supply, and there are other podcasts on that network, and he said, "Well, I see, Steve, that you've got 2 ex-girlfriends." So, but yeah, this is the third effort for me, and believe it or not, we've been at it now. I think this is the 103rd or 4th episode of Gone to the Dogs. So we've had a lot of fun with this podcasting. It's certainly gone a lot farther than I ever thought it would when Chris and I first started Houndsman XP. But anyway, yeah, well, I'm glad that you've been listening that long. And I'll remember that you presented me with a real nice braided paracord leash. Now, you make those things. Do you sell them, or do you?
Well, Yeah, I sell them, but I give more away than I sell. So I just I don't know. It just seems like my dad and my uncles. Anytime we bought something, we had to make it to suit us. We did a lot of our, we do it a lot of DIY, I guess you say. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Some reason I wanted a paracord leash, so I made one, and then as I do sometimes, I get carried away, so I made several of them.
Well, I was impressed from the start with the quality of the leash. In fact, I've kept it as a keepsake rather than use it, and I know it's made to be used, but really nice. And when I saw you last was besides Autumn Oaks. The time before that was at the American Plot Association's annual
Right. Yeah.
breed days there in Greenville, Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I sold a lot of them down there. I just put about 7 or 8 around my body, and walked around, and people come up wanting them. So I sold everything I had.
Well, no doubt, no doubt. I think I ended up having to mail one. My buddy Mark Miller, who he and I partner on the Plot Dog Fever, his buddy there, Steve, had purchased one, I think, from you or had one there anyway. And he left it hanging on the back of the chair at the cabin
Really?
where we were staying. But I happened to notice it as I was leaving, so I took it home and we got it back to him anyway. But okay, well, let's go back to tell me where Nancy, Kentucky is.
Well, it's I guess it's considered South Central Kentucky. It's if you know where Somerset's at, it's probably the biggest town close. We're just about 30 minutes west of Somerset. Yeah. Actually, I was in a small community called Fallbush, and it's just west of Nancy a little bit. So
I gotcha. Well,
I live just the Cumberland Parkway.
Okay. Yeah, I remember going to Somerset years ago for the National Plot Hound Association days. We held it there. And what's Red's, the fellow Red that worked with Wayne Cottle and Kentucky Houndsman for years? Do you know him?
I don't remember.
He's going to kill me because I can't remember the last name right here. But that happens to me a lot these days. But anyway, I remember him being from there, and it'll come to me here in a minute. But yeah, we had a good hunt there. I remember hunting, and it as I recall, it's a little hilly there, right?
It is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, coon dogs or squirrel dogs, what's been your main focus?
Well, I've had about every kind of hunting dog, but coon dogs has been what I always go back to. I've had a few squirrel dogs, but coon dogs is my thing.
Yeah. How old a man are you, Jerry?
I'm 54.
Oh, you're just a kid. I got
yeah.
You. Yeah. I got you, but I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it's a lot. We could just about put your age and Keston Jesse, my buddies, together. You might top me by a little bit, but it wouldn't be much. Well, I remember that experience at Autumn Oaks there in the vendor barn when I was there with, the American Cooner, Full Cry, and my book sales and those sort of things. And I enjoyed meeting you then. And then it just dawned on me that I hadn't had you on the podcast. And then when I heard about that you were going to go out to Virginia and try something for the first time, I thought, well, that'd be pretty interesting to a lot of folks. Now, Nubbin Moore, who's my kind of traveling buddy, did you meet Nubbin at Autumn Oaks?
Yeah, I met Nubbin and Keston. And, it's, these dogs bring you a lot of friends, or you meet a lot of friends through them, I guess. And I'm blessed with a lot of friends, and those are a couple that I could fit in with them too. So,
I'm sure you could. And John Wick paid me a compliment when he did the foreword to my book, Gone to the Dogs, A Coon Hunter's Journey, which I'll put in a shameless plug right here. I do still have copies of that available at my website, stevefielderbooks.com, or you can get them at W Hunting Supply. You can get them at markzepp.com. You can get them at the F&T, I believe is the name of it, up in Michigan. But at any rate, John paid me a compliment by saying that you can usually tell what kind of person someone is by the friends that they keep, the people that they associate with. And I've been totally blessed with good friends, and much better guys than I am. I mean, just really good friends. And that's been the greatest blessing of my career. And if you want to call it that, it's winding down pretty fast these days. But anyway, I was going to tell. Nubbin is a guy that has always wanted to go on a bear hunt. Now,
oh, really?
Yeah, and we had I had told him that if we could get everything together, we would go up to Maine and take a hunt, and we were looking forward to that. And then, as things happen, sometimes Nubbin had to have some hip surgeries, and it's kind of complicated that issue. And again, my age, climbing up and down mountains is not something that's in the picture for me anymore. And I'm sure you know all about that. But before we get into this bear hunting adventure of yours, tell me a little bit about how you got started with coon dogs.
Well, I don't remember the first time I ever went coon hunting, but I'm sure it was with my dad, because I remember my dad wasn't a coon hunter, but he had some buddies, they'd come over every once in a while and hunt with us. And I remember just sitting out in the woods on it, he would be leaned down. I was sitting on his knee, and I remember hearing the dogs. And that's, I'm sure I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And then, never hunted a whole lot until I think my uncle, my dad's oldest brother, had some blue ticks hounds. He hunted a little bit, and he raised some puppies, and he had I think they're about a year old when he let me have 2 of them. He was kind of getting out, so I had a male and a female, and the male made a pretty good dog, and I treated coons with him. And
now these were blue ticks, right?
Well, they were great dogs, but they're blue ticks. But the male looked more like an English, like a blue English. Mm-hmm. And the little female was, she looked like a blue tick, the American blue ticks. But my mom she wouldn't let me go at nighttime, and my dad didn't care as long as I was back to work, in time next morning to work. So, but I would crawl out the window. I remember crawling out my bedroom window after my mom would go to sleep, and I'd take those dogs and go hunting. But I'm lucky enough to grow up in a community where I could do that. We didn't have any close neighbors, but the ones we had, were all farmers, and they all knew me, and they didn't care. And a lot of times, I'd see the old farmer the next day, and he'd say, "You go hunting last night? I heard that dog of yours barking down there." So,
yeah, isn't that an awesome way to grow up, though, Jerry?
Yeah, I didn't realize how good I had it.
It kind of reminds me of the stories that my dad has told, about his beginnings, and listening to the neighbor's dog trail a coon up the river, as he was laying there in bed trying to go to sleep. But I just thank the Lord for the dads out there and the uncles and the grandpas that have taken kids hunting, and as you mentioned there, sitting on your dad's knee there or whatever. And that's the way my dad was too. You know,
I was his shadow for years.
Yeah, yeah. Good way to put it. Yeah,
yeah. My dad passed away when he was 44.
Oh my!
Had a massive heart attack, and but
wow.
About everything I learned from my dad. So,
well, I feel the same way, Jerry. All my love for hounds and 90% of what I know about hounds, I learned from my dad. I mean, there's only so much to know about these dogs. Most of it's totally out of our control when it comes to the genetics and all that stuff. But there was no book called Houndsman 101. And nobody handed me a book and said, here, study this book and you'll be a coon hunter and know what you're doing. But I had a walking encyclopedia, just like John Wick, in my dad. And he provided all that knowledge. And one thing about Dad is he liked to teach me, and he would teach you too if you ask him. Open the door, he'd gladly tell you what he thought, and not in a rude way at all. But he would gladly share what knowledge he had with just about
nothing like the heart of a teacher.
Yeah, well, I think that's right, Jerry. Great way to put it. Well, so I imagine, of course, you're more than 20 years younger than me. So was there an ample coon population back then in your part of Kentucky when you started?
Yeah, we usually when, I told you my dad would have some of his buddies come down. It's usually around, we usually grew a pretty good big garden. And I always had, sweet corn and usually when the coons were about ready to get into sweet corn. So, there was sometimes there were too many coons in our sweet corn patch anyway.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Well, I can remember the trips that I took to Kentucky over in the eastern part of Kentucky around Ashland. My dad had a friend named Jess Runyon that lived over there, and we would make the drive. Ashland's not far from Huntington, West Virginia, so Huntington was about 100 miles from where we lived. So anyway, we would drive over sometimes on a Saturday afternoon and go coon hunting. And then I remember my first licensed coon hunt was at the Bluegrass Coon Hunters Club in Georgetown, Kentucky. Yeah. Have you ever hunted out of that club or been?
I never have.
Yeah. Well, that was the first time I think that I actually participated in a licensed UKC hunt, and I wrote about it in my book. But anyway, okay. So, when did you get dogs of your own? Did that come later?
Well, when I was living, my uncle gave me those two blue ticks I had, and when I was 16, I bought a Walker female, which is the first registered dog I had. I think she's about 4 months old when I bought her off of Marshall Kenny. I don't know if you know Marshall or not, but he used to live here. Now he moved to Indiana. He's lived up there for several years, but
I've heard the name Jerry, but I do not know him.
Marshall had a direct daughter of Call River Chief at the time. And then he bred her to a young male dog he had that was out of Spring Creek Radar and a direct daughter of Hickory Nut Harry, the old Hickory Nut Harry. Mm-hmm. And I named her, I think, Lightning Jill is what I called her. And anyway, she was just a natural. And actually, that whole litter was just made dogs. All you got to do is take them to the woods. And my cousin had one, and several of the younger boys around the community got some of them. And Marshall kept a couple. When he moved to Indiana, he took them up there, and he kind of, he bred them up there, and he's, he got out of coon hunting for a few years, but he's starting to get back into it. But I usually go up there just about every year and hunt with him, 3 or 4 nights, because in that, coon zoo.
Yeah, really.
Up there is where the coons are at. So,
what general part of Indiana is he
He lives in Dana. He's over next to the Illinois, about middle ways, Indiana, just west of Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
About as far as you can go. When you get to
over by the Wabash River. Over there.
Yeah, Wabash River. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool. That's cool for sure. So, have you maintained any kind of breeding program down through the years?
No, and I wish that's something that I really regret. I didn't realize what I had in that little female, and of course I was, my couple of things my dad always told me, and I remember him saying was, said, "Son, if you don't quit fooling those old dogs, you're not going to mount to anything." And he'd always tell me that I wish you'd hurry up. So, anybody can be slow. So, like I say, my dad was a workaholic. So all he thought about was work. So if it wasn't getting work done, and it wasn't beneficial to him. So, but anyway, that's something I really regret is not, not keeping that female because she was out of some, real good blood.
Yeah, you had some really good foundation blood back there in those dogs.
I didn't know what I had.
Sure.
But anyway, I was getting up about 20 years old, and I started milking cows, and I milked cows for about 7.5 years. So, and I had, I wasn't married yet, but I was getting ready to get married. So I thought I better listen to my dad and, quit all this foolishness and get to work. So I sold my little female, and I wish, something I regretted, but so I was without a dog there for probably just a few months. And I think that winter, one of my friends, his brother had a coon dog, and he was just tied up. He wasn't hunting him. And he told us that you boys need to take that dog and go hunting. So we went one night, and he treated coon, did a pretty good job, and I've been hunting ever since. So.
I got you. Well, your dad didn't believe in that all work and no play makes Jerry a dull boy, did he?
Yeah, he did.
Oh man! Well, my dad was he loved the hound so much that the work always came first, and I've told these stories on these podcasts for a long time, and I'll spare the listeners. But after the work was done, that's then when we got to go go hunting or fishing.
My dad had beagles when I was real small. By the time I got up, old enough to go with him, they was, gotten old. But one of his buddies had bred a female and raised some beagle puppies, and he gave me a pair of beagle pups, and I would hunt them in the daytime, and we'd chase rabbits around. That's the first hunting dogs that I had any experience with. So.
Right. Well, did they grow any tobacco in your country there?
Oh yeah. Everybody grew tobacco.
That's what I thought. There's a lot of good if guys enjoy reading, and I've talked about this before. When I wrote my book, I should have written it 20 years earlier because there were a lot more readers then. There's not too many guys actually like to sit down and spend the time to turn the pages of a book, but the guys like me, really like that, and I'm just chomping at the bit here, waiting for the new issue of Full Cry magazine to come out. They have, they tell me they've shipped them already, and so I'm really looking forward to that. But I always like to read and like to read the stories. And there was a favorite author that I picked up on when I was in grade school. Don't know if you ever read him or not, but he was from over in eastern Kentucky. His name was Jesse Stewart. And Jesse was a school teacher for many years, and he wrote several novels. But some of those books were wrapped around the issue of the fox hunters versus the tobacco farmers.
Oh, yeah.
There were actually wars, so to speak. The dogs would get in the tobacco and break the stalks, I guess. and then so the tobacco farmers would take up arms against the dogs. And then when the dog got killed, then the tobacco barn got burned. And
Yeah.
it was a vicious circle there.
Yeah.
But I loved reading Jesse Stewart. And if you're a reader out there and you like to read good stories from a good storyteller, and he's from over in the part of the country where my good friend Whitey Marshall lives. Do you know Whitey?
Yeah.
Jerry?
Yeah. I've hunted with Marshall or Whitey. I
Yeah.
bought a puppy off of him several
Oh,
years ago.
okay. But anyway, Greenup, Kentucky, over that way.
Yeah.
But so I always, when I go, or when I think about Kentucky, I think about tobacco. I think about horse farms. And I that first night hunt that I hunted in out of Georgetown, we hunted on what was called Pin Oak Farm, and I wrote about that in my book as well. So, I think about horses. Never being a drinking man, I don't think so much about the whiskey. Of course, that's Tennessee. I think is maybe a little more known for the whiskey than Kentucky. But Kentucky is a beautiful state. I think from East Kentucky, where my grandparents were from, over around Van Leer and that area where Loretta Lynn was born. That's where they were from. And then I was privileged, in my PKC years to spend a good bit of time over in West Kentucky, over there, which is a whole different world, but it's nonetheless enjoyable. I've always enjoyed the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky's a very diverse. When you talk about different types of country, so
yeah, for sure.
We live in Pulaski County, and it's the third largest in the state, behind Pike County in the eastern part and Christian County in the western part. So, but Pulaski is kind of like the state of Kentucky is diverse. We got some, a lot of agricultural land that's flat.
Yeah.
A lot of it, but we got some of it. Then we have where we live is pretty hilly, and some of these hollers that remind you of the mountains of Virginia. It's just not as big a territory. So.
Yeah, really. Well, Kentucky, fast forward a little bit, has always been a leader when it comes to fighting for a houndsman's rights. And maybe some of that goes back to the history. We look at the history of the Walker dog, with that family in Kentucky and all. But when I was at UKC and the other registries as well, worked a lot with the Kentucky Houndsman Association. It's always done a good job of keeping track of legislation that's out there that might be detrimental,
Yeah, yes, that's very important. You think that, it's never going. It's not in danger. You being able to go out and take a dog and free cast it somewhere and chase an old raccoon and run it up a tree. But that's unfortunately that's not true. It is in danger. And I appreciate the all the podcasts and Chris Powell. I think he does an excellent job of trying to keep people informed and watching, and there's a lot of people out there that do, and you talk about the Kentucky Houndsman Association, and I've never been really what you call a competition hunter. I have competition hunted a little bit, but it's not really my thing. I just like to take a dog and go to the woods, and just to me it just blows my mind that somebody would want to take it away from me.
Well, when I was young and hunting with my dad there, and he was from Tennessee, and of course, going to the farm in Tennessee was my Disney World. And, and when we'd go there, he'd go and visit his boyhood friends who were fox hunters, and we'd go out and listen to the foxhounds run, and then going back home, and we coon hunted on Saturday nights. When my dad was home, he worked away most of the time, and then when I got big enough to go on my own, I would go with anyone that would take me. And we never thought anything that we could possibly lose that privilege, You
Yeah.
know, we didn't have many coons in West Virginia, but we had places we could go turn the dogs loose, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And then when I went to UKC and I began to, well, actually before that, when I was with the National Bloodhound Association and the various local clubs and all, you know, we began to see the forces at work out there. And that was kind of one of my main focuses all the years I was at UKC was, you know, I used to say I could just back my truck out of the driveway, turn right, and it would end up 90 miles away in Lansing at the State House because we had many trips there, you know, to lobby for the Michigan Hunting Dog Federation and the Michigan Bear Hunters and all those groups. And man, we're kind of asleep right now as a hound community. We feel the pressures from loss of places to hunt,
Yeah.
mainly because of the attitudes of deer hunters. Is the main reason, I think, and then a very close second would probably be the urban sprawl. Just like it is here in Florida where they're building right and left. I mean, just you can't imagine how much construction's going on down here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The community I grew up in, you know, like I said, you know, I could crawl out my bedroom window and go hunting. I don't have to worry about anything. Well, there's houses built up. It's, you know, it's all that country's gone pretty much. There's a couple of little farms left and all the rest of them are covered up with houses. So.
Oh, yeah. In Michigan, I've told people many times that I kept a little overlay in the pocket in the back of the passenger seat in my truck. And I could just reach around and pull it out. And it had the names and phone numbers of all the farmers that would let me hunt. And there were more than 30.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of them wanted me to call them before I came out, you know, or so I just pull that out, and I had the phone number right there, and I'd give them a call. But when I left there in 2004 to go to Raleigh, North Carolina with AKC, you know, I was seeing subdivisions being built in some of my places, you know. And I imagine if I go back there now, there's going to be a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. The reason I lassoed you into doing this podcast with me, Jerry, besides the fact that I just wanted to talk to you, is this little trip that you just got back from out to the great state of Virginia. To lay a little bit of background on it, I think you went out and hunted with my good friend, and he and I think I had Heath on the very first podcast that he did, and now he has one of his own. But you went out and hunted with Heath Hyatt on a black bear hunt in the state of Virginia. Tell us how that came about, and tell us about, you know, what happened.
Well, I'd been, you know, like I say, all I've ever done was the coon hunt, and I kind of got a few years ago. I wanted to go, you know, bear hunting. I wanted to be under a bear tree, you know, one time before I got too old to, you know, walk to them. So that's when I met you at Autumn Oaks. That's what I'd asked you about, you know, hooking me up with somebody. And I guess it was Heath you were talking about, but you was going to try to get me hooked up with him. But I had a friend, Billy Johns, that I coon hunted with, and he was, at the time, he's probably 89. He's since passed, but he called me and wanted me to take him to Arkansas. We'd been down there a few times sooner, and so I just had a week's vacation, so I had to, you know, I couldn't do both of them, so I had to cancel my bear hunting trip and to take Mr. Johns to the White River to coon hunt, and he wound up, he couldn't go anyway. So, but me and another buddy of mine went on down and coon hunted. But anyway, so COVID hit, and then kind of put everything on the back burner, and I didn't forget about it, but I kind of, I know it wasn't going to be possible. I didn't want to, take off to somewhere and risk taking COVID and giving it to somebody. So, but so I went to APA breed days in Greenville, Tennessee, and I saw, of course, I'd been listening to the podcast, and we were sitting there by the fire, and my wife said, "I hear that." I said, "That voice I hear sounds familiar." I turned around and it was Heath Hyatt. I said, "I got to go introduce myself to him." So I went and talked to Heath, and I told him, that I was wanting to go bear hunting. So he just invited me down. So, I went. So,
well, Heath and I go back a long time, and when I first met Heath, I immediately liked him. It's another one of those people like we were talking about earlier. The people you meet in life. And Heath was a young coon hunter at that time and had not begun to bear hunt. And had a pretty good little plot female that he had gotten somewhere. I don't remember exactly where she came from.
I think she came from Kenny Rourke.
Kenny, that's right. She did. Yeah, and that was Brandy. And Brandy went on to make quite a name for herself. She won the high scoring plot of the year through the MPHA. She was the Purina high scoring plot. She was a Grand Night champion, of course. And then the year that Heath and I really met and started talking to each other and hunting it together and all was in 1997 at Pomeroy, Ohio, when his Brandy female won the Isaiah Kidd Award, which is the award for the high-scoring dog, plot dog, for 3 nights at plot days. And
I think she was pretty young, too.
Yeah, she wasn't very old. And it just so happened that my dad and I had kind of teamed up and ended up with the Opposite Sex Award, which they present as well. So on Sunday morning, we were staying at the same motel, and he was loading trophies, and we were loading trophies. So the MPHA always kind of really loaded the winners down with a lot of hardware, Yeah. So I said, "Hey, you want to get these dogs together and take a picture?" And he said, "Yeah." So we did that, and still have that picture. It's a cherished photograph, really. But anyway, that's how Heath and I met. And then I was living in Michigan, and he came up and hunted with me up there several times, and then I would come back down. And sometime along the way there, he got bit by the bear hunting bug. And we had a lot of good bear hunts together. So I count Heath as one of my closest friends, a guy that I really like. And
he's a super nice guy.
He really is. Well, okay, so tell me, you guys just kind of he invited you over, and where'd it go from there?
Well, of course, I had my vacation lined out, and just so happened that Kevin Fuzzy, what's his last name?
Now you're asking me for Fuzzy's name?
Yeah,
I don't have a clue.
Well, it's Kevin. Can't remember his last name. Yeah. Anyway, so he had a vacant house there on the Jefferson National Forest where he's going to hunt at. So Heath kind of hooked me up with him, and we got set up to stay there. And so Heath just picked me up there every morning, and we went up on the mountain, and of course, how they do it. They like to have 2 or 3, kind of different, I guess, people in different trucks, 2 or 3 different trucks. And so they can kind of keep up with the dogs and kind of help protect the dogs. Because there's that blacktop road that goes through there, a hardtop they call it, is pretty busy. It surprised me.
Yeah, and you can get some trucks. You can get, and this is just a winding. We better not disclose all the locations.
Yeah.
Heath will be down here skinning what little bit of hair I've got off of
Yeah.
my head. If he has to get an appointment to go bear hunting.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to upset Heath, so if I say
Yeah.
anything,
So
tell me to better Heath,
we'll
at
keep
least.
we'll keep the locations to ourselves. But yes, there's a road that goes along a creek there.
Yeah.
And that's where Fuzzy's
River.
camp is, and Forrest Red is another fellow that normally hunts with Heath, and I think Forrest has maybe had some health issues or whatever, but he lives or has a camp. I say lives. These boys all live over around the Blacksburg, Christiansburg,
Yeah.
Newport, that area over there, but. Just a second.
So,
But-
you know, Heath picked me up about 6 o'clock in the morning. I think you can start hunting at 4, but he said they hadn't been striking barrel up in the later in the morning. So we start about 6 o'clock, and you know, they have a meeting spot. Everybody goes there and see who's hunting, and they kind of know, I think, before, you know, who's going to be there, but then they kind of get a game plan about who's going where, and you know, Heath usually let his dogs out and to, you know, clean out, and then he would decide which one he's going to put up on the rig and which one is going to go in the box, and we just kind of ease around those roads, and you know, the first morning we got a strike pretty quick, but you know, it's kind of amazed me that when they took off, they didn't just hit a track. They went probably 200 yards, you know, up the hill, up the mountain before they even hit the track. So there was just a little bit of a slight breeze, you know, blowing our direction. So I guess the dogs just picked that scent up that far.
They will, roading like that. Sometimes it's a long way to the bear track from where the dog is getting that smell. Did he rig Spook any? Did you get to hunt with Spook?
Spook, yes, sir, I did.
That's one of my favorites that Heath has.
He has, you know, he always puts those Freeze brand, that H on his ear. I think I can make that a B, maybe.
Yeah.
Don't tell Heath I said
that. Right. I remember when Spook was just a pup. Yeah.
Yeah. He, you know, he says he'd like to have another.
Did you hunt with
everybody
Kate?
Was.
Yeah.
No, I think Kate's got puppies.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He mentioned her. He said she was as good as Spook, he thought.
She's a good one. She is a good one. Those dogs have some of that Mike Kemp breeding from out in Oregon.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know what he's got in him, but we ran that bear 11 miles, or the dogs did. And I'm going to guess about half the race, the other dogs stayed pretty close. But after that, he just kept pulling away. And he was a long way in front of them when he treed. So.
Yeah, I did a story on one of Heath's dogs for Bear Hunting Magazine. He had a really phenomenal walker dog back in the day. And I think he wasn't purebred walker, but a dog named Ring that was like that, you know, that could run. And, you know, having bear hunted, I laugh at this when you say all my life. Well, I haven't hunted all my life yet. but, you know, those individuals come to the top. It seems like in every party, every group of hunters, there'll be dogs that the guys will always remember that are just exceptional, you know.
Yeah.
And it's the same way in professional sports or any endeavor in life. I guess leaders, you know, come to the surface and I can remember, you know, and it's another, I won't say lesson, I guess, about this hound sport, that these dogs are not instant. They don't come out of their mama's womb being superstars.
Oh
They
no.
go through a process, you know. He's had some hair pulling moments with those young dogs as they were coming up.
Yeah, he told me he did.
Yeah. And one thing about it, Heath will tell you like it is. You know, he's not going to sugarcoat it. And, but yeah, well, I'm glad you got to hunt with those guys. Well, let me ask you this: how many bears did you get on in the time you were there?
Well, we treed. I was under 2 bear trees,
Mm-hmm.
and the third day we got on another bear, but he said it was going in a bad spot. Which I believe him, and I'm glad he caught him because I didn't want. You know, I'm pretty tough, but he's pretty tough too. I didn't really want to follow him in too many bad spots, but
He's about as tough as they come.
yeah.
Yep.
So I guess we ran 3 bears. I know we ran, with Heath dogs. Now the other guys treat some bears too, and they ran some. We tried to help. We was going to pack on one, and I don't know what happened. The track kind of broke up, so
yeah.
We decided not to pack on it. So,
well, one thing I've learned by hunting with those guys there, and they do it a little bit different than the way we did when I was hunting with my dad. Now, we can go all the way back to the early days where we basically had no roads and we just coupled dogs together. We could have used some of those nice paracord leashes, lightweight leashes you had, but we double couple them, 2 to a lead, and one hunter may have 4 dogs. And we would just hit the mountain in the morning before daylight and start walking, and really had no idea where we would come out. But we did have some communication. We had those old 5-watt walkie-talkies that looked like they were World War II vintage or something. And you could usually communicate with people back on the roads and let them know where you were going to come out or whatever. But anyway, that style of hunting. And then later on, when we had roads, timber company roads to drive, if we found a track or someone found a track, they'd get on the radio. And originally it was CB radios, and later on, I guess, FM, similar to the Marine Band radios. And tell the other hunters, well, let me back up a little bit. During this time, everybody's out there driving around known locations and crossings and things with the hope of striking a bear. Now, back in my early days, we didn't have rigged dogs. We depended on finding where a bear had slid down off a bank and crossed the road or something like that, or go to a place where we knew they would normally cross. But anyway, in that aspect, it was the same. Guys out in several trucks driving around searching for tracks. Then
he says they do that. They'll later on when the bears kind of get concentrated on whatever food they're eating, that they'll get deeper back in the woods too,
right,
farther away from the roads. That they'll take 2 or 3 dogs and walk in there to I guess kind of push them out.
Yeah, that kind of happens, with when you're hunting from the roads and you're hoping to rig one. And the areas that, the bear population has changed a lot over the years. I don't know if it's because there's fewer hunters, but, there's a lot of bear anymore.
Yeah, that's what they
said. Almost anywhere. And but it wasn't that way when I was hunting, especially when I first started. But anyway, the point I was going to make is, back in that day, if someone found a track, they would just wait until everybody showed up there at that track. And, then they would turn a dog or 2 loose to see if they could take it. And unfortunately, a lot of times guys would jump the gun and turn dogs loose too quick, and dogs that maybe hadn't been hunted since the year before and all. So you had a
Yeah.
lot of train wrecks. You had a lot of dogs taking the back end. You had dogs running off game and all that stuff. But these guys, if they find a track and the dog rigs it and the box blows up, as we say, and so forth, they probably pretty much put the dogs down and then tell everybody else. Is that the way they did it when you were there?
Oh, yeah. 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 And
so that's totally different from the way that I hunted for you. And I'm not knocking what they're doing, because it's really, they eliminate that waiting, and they eliminate too many dogs being turned loose at the start,
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So did you have some pretty good runs?
Yeah, we did. Like I say, that one he went over 11 miles before he treed. And the next morning, it didn't go that far. I'm guessing 7 or 8 miles and treed. And then we chased the other one the last day I was there. We had a good race. We didn't have to catch them, but we caught them off of it.
Right.
They were starting to line out pretty good.
Well, we should tell the listeners, and I think they probably have guessed this already, we're not talking about tabletop flat in a cornfield in the Midwest, are we?
No, not hardly.
Yeah. Well, what your pre-thoughts, the thoughts that you had about what it would be like to hunt bears and all, did they any way match up with what you actually experienced?
Yeah, of course, anytime I get something on my mind, it's on my mind. So I've been watching, YouTube videos and things like that. But so I kind of knew what to expect. But one thing that impressed me was, it seemed like Heath knew everybody's dogs. Everybody knew Heath's dogs. And their communication and keeping up with those dogs and protecting those dogs, from the road or whatever. And not only that, but, getting the young dogs, of course, several of them had young dogs, and they were concerned about getting them in on that, that good track that they could run. And, that's what impressed me most, probably, is that, the communication and the knowledge they had of each other's dogs.
Well, they do. They start in the training season, hunting and getting their dogs ready, getting them in shape, that sort of thing. But the one thing that you'll find about those fellas right there particularly, and I would say most hound hunting groups, and in this sport, it tends to form little communities,
Yeah.
You used the word the other day, the culture, the bear hunting culture.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, they become very tight-knit. And a dog left on the mountain, whether it's yours, mine, Heath's, Fuzzy's, Sam's, whoever, is a dog that belongs to us, that we want to recover that dog. We want to make sure he gets back in the truck. And if it means I'm out on that end of the mountain, if it means me maybe not getting my dog in where the action is, to stay out there and try to catch that dog and get him back in a safe place, I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
did you notice that?
I did, yeah. That was one thing I was talking about, how they protect those dogs. And, it's not that protecting my dog, it's protecting, whose ever dog it is.
Exactly. And what you'll find in that group right there, they're extremely hardworking.
Yeah, they're definitely serious about it.
Wesley Woodyard.
Yes, sir.
I have seen him cross ice water creeks
Ooh.
climb tough ridge, drag that bear out.
Yeah.
Hard working bear hunter. And they're all that way. I mean, they all, some of the fellows are a little older, in the group, and they tend to be like me, spend more time close to the vehicle. That was the hardest thing for me for several years, is not be able to just
Yeah.
bust
Not going.
in there with the dogs, But you realize after a while you just simply can't do it,
Yeah.
And that's a tough realization for a guy that was raised up in the mountains that never worried about that sort of
Yeah, I
thing.
can see that. But, there's still a value in that, just, being there and being able to stay with the truck.
Well, yeah, and I'm forever grateful to Heath and to those fellows. They always have treated me like family when I've been there. Of course, I've stayed with Heath so many times. He could probably put me on his tax return.
Yeah.
But I can't say enough about him. And again, back to that thing of we're known by the friends we keep. And
Exactly.
Every one of those guys are just top flight guys. I wish I had the whole list here of names that I could read off, which I don't. I know I'll forget somebody. But most of the dogs that you saw there were probably crossbred dogs, weren't they?
Yeah, it seemed like they were all crossbreds. Blue ticks, crossed. I think they had some blue ticks out of, he's got some, I call them just black and white dogs, they're just black and white.
Yeah.
But they were out of a blue tick female and spook.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of spook's offspring. So I assume that they all thought quite a bit of him. So they were breeding to him. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, speed is the name of the game,
Yeah.
In the mountains. You strike that track. You don't want the dogs to just run a track all day. You want that dog to throw his head up and move that track,
Yeah.
And Spook has been that guy, since he was young. And, and that was always the thing that motivated my dad with his hounds was having that speed, that ability to catch a bear, literally roll him out of his bed and catch up with him and harass him enough that he'll go up a tree, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, it's gratifying to know that you went and you had a good time and you had a good hunt. By Heath picking you up there on the creek, you missed out on stopping it and getting the ham and egg biscuits on the way to the woods every morning. Did he bring you one?
No, actually, I fixed him some breakfast 2 mornings. Yeah, nothing fancy, just a chicken and egg sandwich. So.
Oh yeah, well, there's a place there on the highway there between Blacksburg and where you turn up the creek that is a store there, and they specialize in all kinds of homemade biscuits with eggs and sausage and bacon or Canadian. But any way you want them, you can get. So that was always, a look forward to stop for me when I'm up there hunting with those guys. Well, you see in that community, as you say again, that word culture, there is a whole culture there. There's a lot of unwritten laws, and they're not really, you can just feel them. It's an undercurrent, good sportsmanship. You don't talk bad about another guy's dog. You don't, but they're all knowledgeable. And they know, you mentioned about they know these dogs. They know which ones can be trusted. Yeah, they know which ones just don't have enough experience under their belts yet. Dog A, you might dump the box to the bottom of the holler if he's got something going, because
Yeah.
you know that he's right. Another dog, you might, there may be some question marks about whether he is or not, so all of that comes. There's just that vast wealth of knowledge there that exists within that culture.
Just because the dog barks don't mean they're going to get cut loose.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one thing that Heath does not like, is a dog barking, when
No.
it ain't supposed to be barking.
No, it means something if you're barking,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about something that you mentioned the other day, and I had to laugh. You rode with Heath, I guess.
Yeah, I did.
Did you remember to pay up your insurance policy before you went to Virginia?
I don't want to get, I don't want to talk about Heath driving too mad, because he's actually an excellent driver.
Yeah.
But, I think he's a little bit proud of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if he told you, but there's one, and I forget what we call that place, but when you're back up on top there, and there's one place, a real steep place to come down, and Heath and I one morning, it was frozen. Did he mention to you about he and I coming off that steep place one time?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Maybe you didn't get around there, although I can't imagine in 2 or 3 days of hunting that you didn't. But, man, we were talk about the pucker factor. It was in full force going down that hill that morning, trying to get in, get in the race, get into a place where you can turn the dogs in or head them off or whatever the case. But I have another friend in West Virginia named Evan Workman, and he and Heath remind me a lot of each other in the way they drive. Of course, Heath, we know, is he's a canine officer, and you've heard I'm sure most of our listeners have heard his podcasts and so forth. But no, he'll make you use that grab bar.
Yeah, I did.
But I wrote a story one time for Coon Hound Bloodlines magazine. It was called "Bear Dogs and Bear Hunters Are Crazy."
Yeah.
And when there's a bear chase to get into, it's just here we go. Yeah, but that's I'm glad you got to experience that. What I do is I just try to think of something else when I'm riding with Heath.
Yeah, well, my dad was a pretty wild driver. I sort of used to it a little bit, but he's actually an excellent driver.
Oh, absolutely.
He can drive backwards about as good as he can forward. So that's one of those old man roads. So he don't drive as near as fast going backwards. So
yeah, well, that's it. There's that to be thankful for, isn't it? He's still driving that old blue Chevy truck, or is it GMC Chevy? I think. Yeah,
I think he broke a shock last year. He had to get it fixed.
Yeah, that truck has been on many, many bear hunts.
Yeah,
it's a good one tough. For sure. He doesn't worry too much about the paint.
No.
My dad was kind of like that. He had a Ford F-150, and there was one place, it was up on what we call the Blizzard Strip, an old coal mining strip in Greenbrier County. And there's one place, if you came out that road and it just kind of dead end and dropped off what we call high wall, where they stripped the coal around there. Well, Dad knew what that was. If he got some kind of rookie in there in the truck with him, he'd come flying up there to that thing and last minute put the brakes on. I said, Pop, one of these days that pedal's going to go to the floor and you're going to launch that thing. But that's just all part of the fun of being with a good group of guys and having a good time. And they're very serious houndsmen. Heath has bought dogs all over the country, and studied the bloodlines and all that. And the other boys have too.
Yeah.
So, did you talk much about the dogs at all when you were there?
Well, yeah. When we were trying to rig a bear, that's what we talked about. That's one reason I was pretty excited to go with Heath because, I knew he was a trainer and I'm sure he'd been, educated, been around dogs all his life, but that's something that you never learn, enough. And if you're serious about something, you always want to learn. You always have a open mind. But Heath, he, one thing that impressed me about Heath and his dog handling was his demeanor. He was just calm and he didn't get real excited. And that's one thought I've got probably is that I want dogs to do it when I want them to do it. And he would just he had some patience with them. Now he wanted, he made sure they did what he wanted them to, and they weren't just playing around. But he didn't expect them to do it on his time frame.
Well, that's one thing about Heath from the very start. When he was a new houndsman, he put a handle on his dogs, and I would notice that when we were coon hunting, he didn't put a lead on a dog to walk him out of the woods. I mean, that's very fundamental, but way back, I noticed that about Heath, and he's definitely a good dog man, and just like you talk about when you pull in there in the morning and let them all out to air out, so to speak, and all that, and all he's got to do is speak to them, and they'll be back there. And that's the one thing I noticed that was so impressive when Chris Powell and I went down to Cotulla, Texas, to hunt with Sonny Gorham, the bullfighter. His dogs were cat hunting, and he had 13, I believe. Those dogs are West Texas or South Texas bred. Foxhounds is what they are originally, but they've been bred for cat hunting for so long. Yeah. But he had those dogs in a pickup bed. That just one of those typical racks where just the top slides down in a pickup, and the dogs are all loose inside there. And he laid out those 13 tracking collars in order the way he wanted them. And he would call a dog's name, and that dog would come through that door and stand there and get his collar on, and then he'd let him down and call the next one. He spent a
time with those dogs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, good houndsmen, really good ones, do those sort of things,
Yeah.
But I was always a little too impatient for that, I think. Patience has never been a virtue of mine. I want patience, but I want it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so you had a good time. You got to see some. Were there any of the bears harvested while you were there?
No, it was just training season.
It was all training. Okay.
I did get a pretty good video. The first one we treed was just me and Heath at the tree, and he said, "I'll pull these dogs off." He said, "That bear will probably climb down." And he told me just back up just a little ways, and I can get a video of it. And I thought they would probably just, of course, I think most of the time they do. They come down pretty fast and they take off pretty fast. But this one, it was a small bear, but it just climbed down real slow and just took it forever. It seemed like to get down the tree. And then it actually turned and started to come straight toward me. And then I guess it smelled me.
Yeah.
But it just hesitated for a second, and then it kind of took off the other way. It never did run off. It just kind of, just walked away. So,
were you standing uphill or downhill from the tree?
I was uphill.
Yeah, well, that's unusual. Usually they'll come down and then jump off on the downhill side,
Yeah.
It's like they get an extra boost there.
Well, Heath was downhill, so.
Oh, okay. So
probably why it came up.
Yeah. Well, he saw that big ugly thing, and he came up your way then, did
he? Yeah.
As my buddy Heath, I'm glad you got to go hunting with him. He's one of the best.
Yeah, me and my wife we stopped at Pigeon Forge for a couple of days before we went on to Virginia, and I bought him a couple of T-shirts, and I think I got him some fudge, and she said, "You just the only reason you're buying him so he'll invite you back next year."
Well, hey, whatever works, right?
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Whatever works. Well, we've done good. We haven't disclosed any of Heath's favorite hunting spots or anything. Well, that does bring up a question. Is that trip going to make a bear hunter out of you?
Well, my wife came out and met Heath and Wes, and she said she was a little bit worried about having to move to Virginia. So I don't think so. I'm pretty rooted here, and I better stick with coon hunting and
sure.
a little bit of a flatter ground mode. But I'm definitely going to try to go back. If Heath will have me, he's already invited me back. So,
he's a very gracious, accommodating guy.
He is,
so, for sure.
That culture, I call it just the bear hunting culture. When I went down to Greenville, I could see it there, and they're serious about that. The East Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia. It's alive and it's really thriving there, and that appeals to me.
Well, yeah, it is, and thank goodness the bear population, and to the credit of those guys. I remember before COVID, it was a couple of years there that Heath and the group of guys there that you met and all, they treed more than 50 bears from the beginning of the training season until the end of the kill season. And I know one year out of those 50 bears, they killed 10, and they were all males.
Yeah, they haven't treated bear this year that they wanted to kill. Of course, they got the kill season coming up. I think they had, and nobody wanted to kill one, but I think they got one of them had a younger son or something that was going to kill one, and they're just trying to find something big enough for him to kill. They said they weren't going to kill any sows at all, just to protect the bears and.
Yeah. Well, I think not all parties have been like that. And I think there's been some sows killed, across the state where the numbers have been down a little bit the last couple of years. And I think it's going to possibly affect their early season, going forward and so forth. But, these guys take care of their sport. It means the world to them, and they treat it that way,
Yes.
And they're very conservation-minded and very concerned about, the future.
Right.
So, and that goes, I'm thankful for my heritage because, that's the culture that I grew up in. My dad hunted bears for over 50 years. And, that was his sport. That was his game. It consumed him. The dogs, he loved his plot dogs. But, I grew up around those kind of people. And I can see, I know where their hearts are. And I just wish them many, many years. Most all those guys are younger than I am by a considerable amount. And I just hope that they can continue to enjoy that sport for many, many years to come.
Yeah, when I was down at the breed days at Greenville, I saw a lot of, those old houndsmen, and they reminded me of, some of the people that grew up, when I was growing up around the community, that, the dog traders and the hunters, and, you used to be a lot of just old country stores, and you walk in,
Sure.
and, they'd be back there and, talking dogs or whatever, but, there's not many of them left. They're about all gone now.
That's true. You
No, I
know
met
that. Yeah.
Roy Clark down there. I talked to him a few minutes, and
What a jewel.
yeah,
What a
yeah,
jewel he is. I
yeah,
love to I loved, I don't think Roy get mad at me, but I love to kind of talk like Roy sometimes. Now,
yeah,
Steve, that bear went up there in the Gulf. It's where they treed that bear that day.
yeah.
As Clay Newcomb would say, and Roy says, they was over yonder. It's not yonder, it's yonder. He loves Roy dearly. As you know, he's said him many times on
Oh
his
yeah,
podcast. What an amazing human being
yeah,
Mr. Roy
yeah. I
is.
would love
He's
to
a
spend
great
some
guy.
time with Roy.
Yep. It's as you say, you just labeled it exactly right. It's a culture,
Yeah,
and it's a mountain culture pretty much. Now, the guys that are listening from out west, they'll say, well, we have our own brand of that out this way, and I'm sure they do. And in Michigan, I was introduced to a whole different type of culture where they hunted off bait and so forth, and I was fortunate to work with the bear hunters up there for many years with the Michigan Bear Hunters Association, was on the board, and just, these groups and up in Maine and New England and, Vermont, New Hampshire, all up in that area too. And it's just something that's as American as apple pie, and it needs to be preserved. And that's why it's so important that we stay aware. Clay Newcomb said, guard the gate,
yeah,
against any of this anti-hunting sentiment where people don't understand that culture, and they will never understand it until they do like you did, Jerry,
yeah.
and go
Right.
experience it firsthand. Don't you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I do agree. Hounds have, not been my whole life, but they've been a big part of my life, and they're certainly not the most important thing in my life, but they are very important to me.
Yes.
And it's Heath and them are the same way. That those bird dogs are a very important part of the. It's not like I say, their families are more important than the hounds, and there's a few things that are more important, but the hounds are definitely important.
Yeah, they definitely are, and that's exactly the way I was raised. That's the way my father was, and naturally I followed along, in his footsteps. And well, long live the bear hunters, and it looks like there's plenty of them out there. My brother lives about 2 hours west of Heath, and he's eat up with bears around where he lives.
Okay, I saw Beckley, West Virginia. That's where you're from, right?
That's where I was born. Yes, my brother and I were born in Beckley. Right.
So where does your brother live at?
He lives in Tazewell, Virginia.
Tazewell, okay.
Yeah. And that's about 90 miles from Beckley. You go south from Beckley on Interstate 77 to Princeton. Then you're familiar with Route 460. I'm sure you traveled on it. Well, you take 460 to the west instead of going east toward Heath.
Yeah, okay.
And he lives back in that area there. And got, mountains all around. And and then, of course, Keston, my buddy that you met at Autumn Oaks and all, he lives in Lebanon, which is about 45 minutes or so on further west from my brother. Okay. So it's all the same part of the world.
Yeah, I would have loved to, hooked up with Keston and coon hunting one night. Saw that
coon vending machine.
Coon vending machine.
Clyde got snake bit a couple nights ago. Copperhead, got him on the back leg right in the hock.
Yeah, that's a bad place to get it.
Yeah. He's a little sore, but he's going to survive. I wouldn't doubt if Keston doesn't have him out tonight. Knowing him, he can't stay home. Well, Jerry, I think we've outshined this tree for this week, but I sure do, like Heath invited you to come back, I'm going to do the same.
Yeah,
because
that's
I think we got a lot to talk about. And
yeah.
I want to talk to you about some of that Kentucky coon hunting and some of the dogs that you've hunted with and all that stuff. So if you'll agree, we'll do this again.
We will.
Sounds great. Folks, Jerry Barker from Nancy, Kentucky. It's been a real privilege to have Jerry on the program today. I want to briefly congratulate the winners at the UKC World Hunt, the Cookie Dog, the winners at the PKC, the Super Stakes. It's a shame all that got held on the same weekend. I hope the registries will kind of get their heads together and separate that stuff out a little bit. Also, the PKC Youth World and all. I don't have all those names in front of me, so I don't want to mess it up. But let's just say congratulations to all those winners. I know you worked hard all year to get to that point, and you should certainly be proud. Well, folks, that's it for this week. If anyone asks you where's Steve Fielder, tell him why he went over there to Nancy, Kentucky. He's over there hunting around those tobacco farms and stuff with Jerry Barker. He's gone to the dogs.